So,
There you
all
go.
right, welcome
Screwed
to
it
the
up.
bonus topic. We're here again with Robert Caplin. We're going to be talking about photojournalism specifically, and specifically, is photojournalism worth the risk, or is the risk of photojournalism worth it? We had the recent death of NPR photojournalist David Gilkey and his translator, and they were in a really dangerous situation. I mean, they were obviously doing it to help give us the story about, I think, a region that the majority of people have really not thought about because we haven't been doing too much content from there, obviously, since the majority of the troops left. But we're putting ourselves, or at least some of us are putting ourselves in very dangerous situations to get these stories. And of course, is it worth it? So, Robert, why don't you go ahead and start and kind of tell us your thoughts on this?
No, is pretty much my thought on it. I mean, in terms of, I I hate that people are dying to tell these stories. I have a friend who was killed. Chris Hondros, who I actually have a story about Chris. He went to Ohio University, where I went to. Graduated prior to me, years before, and he came back for one reason or another to talk to one of the professors or something, and they got him to. This is in 2003, 2004, 2005 time frame, and they asked him to give a presentation to our photojournalism class, and what ended up happening was unlike most and I, unlike most presentations, he just decided to show his raw take from the minute he walked out of the hotel or wherever he was staying. I think this is in Liberia during the Civil War. To all the way to the point where he made his famous photo of the guy jumping in the air with his bazooka, um, and he and then his way back. And it was the most terrifying set of images I've ever seen, because he's walking out, and as he's walking out, people are being wheelbarrowed. They're coming, people that are still alive with their limbs not attached, being wheelbarrowed away from the fighting zone. People that are wounded, people that are dead, ammunition all over the place, all the way to this point where you saw he locked onto this fighter, and who had a bazooka and shot him shooting this thing, and just got this huge emotion shot, and he killed it. He took amazing photos, and I give him huge kudos to war conflict photographers out there that risk their lives. But I just don't think it's worth it when when friends of yours die. Chris didn't have a family, didn't have kids. He was just about to get married. But another story, I interned my junior year of college at the Los Angeles Times, and Louis Cinco, at the time, was telling me about. We were in the photo desk area, and he was saying, "Yeah, I'm gonna go to Iraq, to cover the war and stuff." And I was just an intern, I'm a junior in college, and I just looked at him like, why? Why don't you have kids? You've got kids, and you're going to go to this place where, you could get hurt, killed, injured. Is it worth it? And he goes, yeah, and he talked about it and whatever. So a month or so later, I think this was towards the end of my internship, I end up emailing him because I saw one of his photos come back. He took a famous photo called the Marlboro Man photo of kind of like a headshot with a guy with a cigarette hanging out. His face is all sandblasted and artillery stuff, and became was big for it was the big photo that came out of Iraq during that couple of months. And I just sent him an email to his email address and said, hey, wonderful work that you're putting out there and capturing, and he wrote me back. I didn't expect to get an email from him because he's shooting a war, right?
Yeah.
And he writes me back and says, Robert, I was actually thinking about you yesterday or the other day when I was buried in a trench with bullets zipping over my head, wondering, why am I here? And it kind of like it just sort of hits home, like it sounds so glamorous, and maybe to some people they're willing to risk their lives, but I don't know how they do it, and I'm sure that it gives it's like a thrill, some sort of a high doing that type of work. Yeah, a rush, and that's all well and good, but there's a certain amount of danger involved, and especially these days. Oh, I did a podcast with Nick Ut, who shot the famous Vietnam napalm girl photo, and we talked about it these days because his brother was killed during the Vietnam War. He was following in his brother's footsteps, believe it or not, in Vietnam, and we were talking about would you do it now? Would you go cover a war? And it's just like no, it's like these days it's just too much. It's there's being a journalist puts a target on you, and you're going to can be used as propaganda. So I wouldn't recommend that my kid. I asked him. I said, would you recommend your kid going into war? And they said no. No, I wouldn't do that these days. It's just a different beast. And so anyhow, yeah. That's my anecdote, and I while I really appreciate the service that these photographers do and how important it is to tell these stories, in the end, if they die, it's not worth it. No.
Yeah, I don't think any image is worth dying over. I think life is more precious than that. But do you think there's any merit in going into sending or being someone who goes into dangerous areas, or do you think that that's just due to its nature of it being dangerous, we as a people shouldn't seek out imagery and stories from those areas because of that by their nature they're dangerous?
Yeah, I mean, it's a catch-22, right? I think that it's almost like
you mentioned the person you interviewed who shot the napalm girl. Had they had sort of had they said, well, I could, go to it, that could be a dangerous area to go to, we'd never have that image,
Right? I mean, no, totally. It's a catch-22, yeah. And it can change the course of a war, as we've seen with Eddie Adams' photo or Nick Ut's photo, and to an effect, Chris Hondros' photos, really had an impact as well. So I don't know. What I was going to say is it's like. Literally, being that type of photographer is like being a warrior almost. You have to be a warrior, just like a soldier knows that they're going in to do this for the good of the world and is willing to take that chance and make that ultimate sacrifice. I mean, that's what a conflict photographer has to do, especially the ones in real active conflict zones. There are other photographers, for instance. I did a podcast with my friend Daniel Sullivan, who's based in Maui, Hawaii, that poor guy, and he, put out a book. Gosh, now I'm forgetting where it is, but his book was he documents conflict zones, but doesn't go to the front lines. He does the stories of the people, how they're affected. There are different ways to cover war that isn't necessarily just bang bang, right?
Yeah.
So there's an option. But there's also, well, it becomes a weird thing because it's journalism versus propaganda. There's amazing military photographers out there that are capable of producing and capturing these intense photos. But of course, it's government. Photos being edited by the U.S. government and sent out, and it's not journalism. Who knows what was redacted or what wasn't told or what other photos were available. So I don't know. It's a hard one. I mean, I just don't think I just don't want to see good people get killed to take a picture.
What
about?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Robert, or Zach.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I'm one of those guys that runs to every single American conflict. I mean, obviously, no comparison to, especially what's happening in the Middle East, overseas, or wherever. But I mean, I always feel like it has this. It's bigger than a photo. I think it's the full story, and if otherwise, unless people go, the only way we get any story from it is from like there's a movement in a lot of which I understand logistically or whatever, a movement like, what is it, Reuters made the decision to only hire local people in Syria, which to me, we've already had several different stories about that coming out where, because they're local people who were already covering it for.
And they also hired that 19-year-old that got killed, and
yeah.
you know, like.
And so it just comes down to, I mean, one of the things that worries me now, and CS and I have had this conversation, CS Muncie and I've had this conversation, especially when we were going to Kiev back in 2014, and we either lucked out, depending if you're my mom, or didn't luck out if you're my, you know, the purpose of going there. We missed the action, which is probably a good thing. But you know, there's no.
So if CS had gotten killed by a rubber bullet that was meant for an angry protester because he hit it in the temple, you know, what would you be saying now?
Well, I don't know. I mean, that's one of the problems. Like I had, having this having conversation when you're talking. We talked to Eros Hoagland before about this as well, whose father died in Central America. He actually decided to leave photojournalism for the most part because one of the many reasons was because the backing, no one cares, is what he's roughly said. He changed kind of, but is that I don't know if we have the backing. I mean, I know that a couple friends were trying to go to Liberia to cover the Ebola crisis there, and they decided not to go because basically every single outlet said, "We're happy to take your photos, but if anything happens,"
right?
And and to me, that's one of the biggest things that, I mean, obviously, the difference of even Vietnam to what war is now, especially with ISIS and just the idea, again, like you said, that we're targets immediately. I mean, we're targets in America as well. I mean, I've seen more abuse
at a
against
Trump rally.
Very different. Well, we're specifically
conflict zone right there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we are in a walled area off the fence. Anyway, I tried desperately not to compare the two, American conflict zone and overseas, because there's still not a comparison.
After seeing Jabin Bodsford's Snapchat of what a Trump rally is like from the perspective of a journalist, when Trump says, those bad journalists back there, everyone turns around, and he just took a Snapchat of what it's like to be on the receiving end of the entire crowd of these like crazy drunk, like racist buttholes, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
No, I have video of that. I've been probably going to end up using it in a documentary, so I haven't posted it, but I'm probably just going to do it because it's something that people need to see, that he actually calls it out. It's not anyone, it's a presidential candidate directly calling out and saying, turn around. I mean, I don't know if he says turn around, but like basically point your fingers and yell at people. And we're like our friend, I think you've done at least one post with Marcus DePola, but they put up all your workspace often now is right up at the front. So you were literally, we have had a couple of different problems where people have either, people put their drinks down on your workspace. People like are able to just grab your laptop, grab your camera off the workspace right there, and amongst all of this stuff. I mean, covering a presidential campaign. I can't think of any other year that it's comparison, that it's actually, combat political photography. I don't know if we can make up a term, but it's kind of amazing, the differences these days. But I still want to move towards my eventual goal is to do more conflict work. My big problem is that, again, the outlets just aren't there to be able to back in any way, shape, and form, and I unfortunately don't have the credit card to get over there and go forward. I mean, all my outlets are usually, I work in lefty journalism a lot more, and they to convince them to even spend money on photography has been a 5-year struggle, and I finally got most outlets there. It's kind of amazing, but Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it's an interesting thing. Like I just have noticed I would prefer to travel and see the good, the good parts of the world and make pretty pictures and have amazing experiences than personally risk my life at least. And again, kudos to you that do it. And I think it's important to say, like, when you, because I've seen you and CS and many others follow the news. There's a bunch of people that do that sort of work, and it's like, I wonder at some points, there is like an overkill of media at some of these.
Oh my God,
types of thing, Ferguson and what I mean, just from. It's just like there's more media in town than actually live in the population of.
I mean, Ferguson was a complete nightmare like that. In that way, is that there was just basically we're almost at a certain point where we're tripping over each other. I've started trying to, since now I've started moving more towards a lot more towards video. I've started trying to cover stories other than the, batons meets head stories.
Right.
Because I mean that. I'm never going to get those. I'm never going to get the photos that the guy, some LA Times photographer has with the, with all the red equipment and the very expensive gas mask and and everything. So I've started trying to tell more stories. I mean, I also work as an investigative journalist. So writing and kind of like investigating is a little bit more, is also more my thing, which is, I guess, the one thing I have like as an edge over, people who are much, much better photographers. So,
right.
But yeah. So
looks like we lost our host.
I think we did. So did you have anything else you want to add to this segment? We usually try to keep this one shortish. So.
Yeah. No, I don't. I think I probably over talked on this one, so I'm good.
No, I mean, it's a good point, because I mean, I don't have, a lot of friends that have done that. I don't have any, luckily, I guess I haven't, definitely luckily I haven't lost anyone, in conflict, because I just don't have the circles,
Right.
But yeah, so I mean, if something like that happens, God forbid, I don't know what I would say, but I'm completely, that's one of the reasons why I preface everything under the sun with, like, I don't have the experience. I know walking out of my hotel room in Kiev and just, it was a peaceful, nice day, and still my adrenaline was like going through the roof, carrying having a vest on and carrying gear and looking at guys that literally have like foxtails over their head and literally carrying battle axes. And luckily there being a European looking white guy, it was a completely safe zone, and but
not completely, but
well, I mean, relatively, the worst thing you could be, due to the number of spray painted and graffiti things that the white supremacist or neo-Nazi groups and stuff like that, that was one of the few things that actually really got me on edge, because
so you're saying you blend into that crowd, huh?
Pretty well. I mean, it's also one of the reasons why I've been able to, it's one of the reasons I've been able to talk to Donald Trump protesters so well, is that, I'm a relatively unassuming, straight white guy that, talks just okay enough, so I mean, it's a thing, I guess. I got to use that when I'm in, when I'm in St. Louis. It's not really a thing. It takes a lot more work for me to get in and talk to people than someone else might be able to. So,
right.
But I guess it's my white privilege. So
at least you admit it.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, so it's part of the
comes in handy, right?
It almost never hasn't. So yeah. But anyway, on that weird political note, I guess we'll call it a day. Thank you much, Rob, and I'll have a post for you later today or later in the week for Sight On in the Bag, because I've started moving more towards video and stuff like that. So I have a whole new bag than I used to have. So
awesome.
So cool.
All right, man. Well, great speaking with you and both of you, and we'll do it again sometime.
He's in the middle of moving, so it's all weird. So yeah, but you have a good one. Have a good night,
right.
And thank you to anyone who subscribes to the podcast and has listened to this extra episode. And you have a good night.
Thanks. All right. Cheers.
Cheers.